I'm going to begin by introducing the head facilitator of this conference. Um, Brian Jarrett is a lawyer, a sociologist, a mediator, and he wants me to add he's also Canadian. He's developed the program on dispute resolution here at the University of Alaska, which offers courses in mediation, arbitration, dispute systems design, and restorative practices. He's also edits the Alaska Journal of Dispute Resolution and has worked for, this is the 5th year, connecting everyone on the cyber conference. He does research and writing in dispute resolution, mediation, and restorative justice. Welcome, Brian Jarrett.
Thank you, Polly. Thank you. A big welcome to everybody and everybody in the rooms at the different sites. Welcome to the Cyber Conference, or our Conference on Dispute Resolution. We say Cyber Conference for short. And at this event, we're looking to have a global conversation, a conversation from local sites to a global audience. So we have people at various sites around the globe, universities, organizations that come into this every year. And we want to encourage those people today to speak, to have their ideas heard. And to everybody else coming in as a student, this is a good opportunity really to have access to some of the, leading contributors at in different places and jurisdictions and countries that will allow you to have kind of access and a conversation with people in this field that will, I think you'll really enjoy the ideas and enjoy the conversations today. So welcome to everybody. I want to just say up front that we're on Diné land here. This is actually Trothieta. It's called Trothieta. It's originally Diné land here at the University of Alaska, Fairbanks. And so we just want to acknowledge that and make sure that people know that the university is actually built on that land over on this hill that we're at this site here. We'd also just like to thank quickly Kate Sunwood from the Women's Center, who's co-sponsoring the event. We're very grateful for that. We're also grateful to Chancellor Rogers. Ryan Rogers supports this event every year. He wanted the people to know that he's in Norway at the Board of Governors for the University of Arctic Conference and couldn't be at this conference, but wants people to know that he supports it and will be here next year and so forth. Want to thank Polly Heislop for coordinating the event and getting all this ready. Want to thank also Jerry Farnham, our technician, for all the good work that made this possible. And to thank the technicians at all the various sites. We're very grateful that people did the work to make this possible. So thank you very much. What we'd like to do is to go to the various sites and have you briefly introduce yourself and to say who's there at that site. And we'll just go around briefly. That way we know who's who. And so what I'm going to do is turn to the screen and go around the various sites. So I wonder if we could do that right now. And we'll start with, let's see, is Assad University here, Dr. Musa Ghazi? Dr. Musa Ghazi? Okay, we'll just keep moving along as we go. And see, Guam University.
Really taking on a whole bunch here, right?
Guam University. Just wave your hands there. Okay, not quite there yet. Okay.
No, we're here.
We're not.
Okay.
We're here. Hello, Brian. We're here.
Hello. Oh, very good, Zenny. Good, good. And if your mic is on, please mute your mic locally, and that way we won't have the crosstalk. But when we call for you, just then put the mic on, talk, and then we'll go off that way. So we'll have an easy conversation.
So muted.
So,
All right.
All right. Very good. Ministry of Justice, British Columbia.
Yeah,
Ministry of Justice. Oh, very good. Welcome. Ministry of Children and Family Development, British Columbia. Just raise your hand if you're on there yet. No? Okay. And Native American Rights Fund. Native American Rights Fund, just say here. Okay, very good.
Here.
And Salisbury University, Brian and Tom. Salisbury University, very good. Simon Fraser University. Brenda, oh, very good. Okay, and law offices of Adam Golkis.
I'm here, thank you.
Oh, very good. Okay, welcome. University of Alaska Anchorage. University of very good, waving down at the bottom. And University of Texas. University of Texas, see you there? Very good. Hello. University of Hawaii at Manoa. University of Hawaii at Manoa, just wave your hands. Hello. Very good. University of Puerto Rico. Dave Wexler. Dave? Very good, up the top. And Yukon College. Yukon College. Just wave your hands, Yukon College. Oh, very good. Vision Alaska, Brethren Ministries. Okay, have I missed any? Oh, Raf Gangat from Israel, from East Jerusalem. Just have you on there. If I've missed anybody, please call out to say hello. Call out to say hello.
Brian, this is Michael Jones at Arizona Summit Law School in Phoenix, Arizona. And I'm waving my hand right now so you guys can see me.
Thanks, Mike. Welcome.
And Brian, Roger Cluck here in Seattle with the Alternative Violence Project.
Welcome, Roger. Good to see you from Seattle. Okay. Who else? Anybody else? Just please announce yourself. We can't see all the screens, so we want to make sure you get an opportunity to announce yourself. Okay. Well, later on, you can also do that as well. Very good. Okay. So.
Announce yourself. This is Freddie Olin in Juneau.
Oh, very good. Freddie Olin.
Do that as well.
Thank you. Freddie Olin is Executive Assistant to Lieutenant Governor Byron Mallott of the state of Alaska. Thanks, Freddie. Good to see you. Anybody else? Just to please announce if you're there so we can see who you are and where you're coming from. All right. We got everybody? Okay, we're going to keep moving along here. So if you come in, if you want to announce later on, by all means, please do say your name and announce and come on in. What I'd like to do now is to briefly introduce our speaker, our elder, our community elder. Oh, I'm sorry. Before I do that, just briefly we'd like to acknowledge we also have in the room here our guests. We have Mayor Eberhardt and we have Chief Aragon, City of Fairbanks, who are also present in the room as our guests from the community. We have other guests from the community. We have faculty, we have students, and graduate students, and members of different faculties here as well participating. And I'd like to introduce now our elder, Howard Luke, our community elder. Howard is a peacemaker, is a long-time respected elder in our community. He has been involved in mediation and runs his Gallia Spirit Camp, and has been a real supporter in the community of young people and of peacemaking in general. So we're very grateful that Howard is here today. Thank you. So Howard, I'll give you the mic here.
Yeah. Basi tunaka tunakhayelela abon nini siya ina chuko su ina chuko hablaonene sila ina chuko siya ina hablaone yata habat ayat. What I said, I thank you very much for you young people to believe in the Creator, and that we wanna work together. So I thank you very much for inviting me, and I left to work with the young people. This is my thing. So I hope you, all of you, I don't know you, but I hope that you believe in me and hold hands and guide each other. So I thank you very much. That's it.
Now I'd like to introduce Peter DeCaro. Dr. DeCaro to my right is coming up to the podium. And Dr. DeCaro is the chair of Communication Department, University of Alaska Fairbanks, and he's going to introduce our keynote speaker. Peter?
I just got a couple of announcements. First, just edification. Starting in the fall of 2015, the Department of Communication will have an entire minor in dispute resolution with an emphasis in indigenous dispute resolution completely online. We're also working, hopefully in 15-16, we will have occupational endorsement certificates in dispute resolution with an emphasis in indigenous dispute resolution. And in coordination, we are hoping to tie in with Yukon College on some of the indigenous dispute resolution with First Nations there. And so we're looking forward to doing that hopefully in 2015-16. Second, in cooperation with, partnering with Dr. Brian Polkinghorn over at Salisbury University, we are sponsoring UAF and Salisbury University, his Center on Dispute Resolution, sponsoring a peace conference workshop in Cyprus for April 15 through 17 in 2016. We have gotten all the major participants from the initial peace talks. Dr. Ahmet Sosin from Northern Cyprus, Turkey, and Dr. Nikos Peristianis, the former mayors, etc., of both Cypruses, and we have about a dozen or so of the former negotiator mediators for the peace conference that was going on, all the peace initiatives, and is being headed up by Dr. Marco Turk, who's down in Dominguez Hills, who's the person who trained all these individuals through the UN and the peace initiative. So look for that for those of you interested in that type of thing. It's not your talking head. We're actually going to have workshops there in which the participants will discuss the strategies they employed towards gaining the bi-community resolution, et cetera, and the things that worked that didn't work. Okay. The sessions are going to be 40 minutes each, and when we get down to 10 minutes, I will be holding up this big 10 that says you got 10 minutes left. Right? Then we'll go to, if I can grab this right, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, and then time means to wrap it up, please, within 30 seconds or so, or a minute tops. Okay, and our guest speaker has approximately 15 minutes. We'll give him a little latitude since he is the guest speaker. But before I introduce him, I want to introduce Saiko Kurabara. Would you bring that forward, please? She grew up in Japan and recently received a degree in English literature at the University of Toyama in Japan, and she has created this work of art for our guest speaker. And so let me hand this over to you, and you can talk about it.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here as a featured artist today. I'm very honored that my painting will travel abroad as a gift from Alaska. In this painting, I painted two birds, common redpoll, enjoying the sunlight on the birch tree. I tried to express a tiny warmth and the coziness in cold. This painting is very special to me because it gives me a hope for the oncoming spring after a long Alaskan winter. Thank you.
Dominigato. All right, our featured speaker. Shalom, assalamu alaikum. I'd like to introduce Ambassador Raf Gangat. He is a former South African ambassador to the Palestinian territories, the United Arab Emirates, and Consul General to Pakistan. Mr. Gangat resides in East Jerusalem, or as he terms it, the Holy Land of Conflict. He works as a professional communication and media consultant and currently has a radio talk show which he hosts in Israel. So without ado, let me introduce Mr. Raf Gangat.
Thank you, Brian. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow cyber colleagues, good morning to you. To begin with, a very warm hello and special thanks to my good friend, Dr. Brian Polkinghorne at Salisbury University and his wonderful program, of which I was a part of 2 years ago, and for his kind recommendation. Thank you, Brian. Well, I'm both honored and humbled to be able to join you from the land of eternal conflict. From the time of the Romans to the Crusaders, the Turks, the British, the Jordanians, the conflict continues. Today, the protagonists are Israelis and Palestinians. Well, ironically, while divisions widen and conflicts amongst humans on the terrestrial level continue, we are at the same time reaching out and forging ties that bind. Thanks to cyberspace, I was quite pleased to learn that we have universities all across the United States and some from South America as well joining us this evening. Well, on the other hand, when we talk about conflicts, they're so easy to resolve. Take the classic case of two kids fighting over the sharing of a cake. Who cuts the cake? Who chooses? I mean, that's the question. Well, to manage this with a win-win outcome, he that cuts the cake lets the other choose. And this places the onus on the first kid to make sure it's equally cut and the conflict is then resolved to both his satisfaction. Now, focusing as a South African who grew up during the worst days of apartheid, serving as a diplomat during its last days and demise, and then I continued during the glorious Mandela years of peace and reconciliation. Today, 21 years after freedom and democracy, I can simply say the solution to ending apartheid was, in essence, all the players in the conflict, which is about color, race, and culture, sat around a table, spoke to one another, and then we jointly wrote a constitution which addressed everyone's hopes, fears, and aspirations. Well, following that, we had democratic elections, and many more have followed since. Well, I like to quote Nelson Mandela, if you want to make peace with your enemy, you have to work with your enemy, and then he becomes your partner, unquote. Well, coming back to the eternal conflict to the Holy Land, in 2003, as South Africa's ambassador to Palestine, I had a ringside seat on the Palestinian side of the conflict, and I perceived it from that perspective. And let me admit, it was also clouded by my South African experience. In 2008, I made the transition from being an ambassador to become a DJ and the host of the only political talk show on 93.6 RAM FM, a radio station that provided a platform for both Palestinians and Israelis in a neutral language, English. I then entered the ring itself, and in a sense, I became a referee to the conflict. Well, then it was time for me to suspend my own perceptions, engage Israeli society, understand its fears and problems, and also to give a voice to Palestinian society to articulate its hopes and aspirations, all in order to have a comprehensive picture of the conflict and to be an objective facilitator to peaceful dialogue. And hosting guests from both sides and talking about issues that divided them as well as united them, I learned eventually no one wants to hear the truth. As Frantz Fanon aptly said, and I quote him, sometimes people hold a core belief that is very strong. When they are presented with evidence that works against that belief, the new evidence cannot be accepted. It would create a feeling that is extremely uncomfortable, called cognitive dissonance. And because it is so important to protect the core belief, they will rationalize, ignore, and even deny anything that doesn't fit in with the core belief, unquote. Well, today, as a detached observer sitting far away from the ring itself, I can say this conflict is all about the land. One party believes they have a God-given title deed to the land, whereas the other party believes it's their ancestral land. Well, briefly, after the first uprising, or as they call it, the Intifada, managing of the conflict manifested in the Oslo Peace Accords, which gave 78% of the Holy Land to Israel and 22% to Palestine. Yet it did not work. Why, one would ask? Well, security became an issue for the Israelis. Freedom remained the issue for the Palestinians. Well, this conflict has dragged on, and many today consider it intractable. Yet the solution is so simple. If one obtains freedom, the other gets its security. And I mean, if it's not for me to prescribe, a solution to the conflict, but if both sides simply sit down and talk, I'm of the firm conviction that it can be solved. Like what we did in South Africa. We sat down, we addressed our fears, concerns, hopes, and that's where we resolved it. It's the only way to solve this conflict. Otherwise, the longer this conflict continues, the chances of obtaining a peaceful solution is fading away, and quite fast too. While the alternative is fascism on the one side and radicalism on the other side, both explosive ingredients for yet another bloody war. While all said and done, history has taught us many lessons we continue to ignore. And briefly, let me talk about colonialism. Colonialism ushered in European superiority, but eventually came undone, beginning with the philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi, who began his journey in South Africa and played a key role in standing up against the British, obtaining India's freedom and democracy. Hitler's Nazism, based on the notion of the superiority of the Aryan race, produced World War II and the Holocaust. And that led to untold suffering and the deaths of millions, but that was eventually checked by the Allied forces before that cancer spread. Stalin's communism came up against Western capitalism, which then led to a protracted Cold War, eventually caving into freedom and economic enslavement, just like the rest. Well, apartheid, conjured up by white Afrikaner nationalists, caused much grief and harm to millions who suffered under the yoke of an inhumane social system. Well, eventually, Nelson Mandela led the country from that abyss into an era of freedom and reconciliation. But sadly today, xenophobia has filled in that vacuum left by apartheid, and Africans today are fighting and killing fellow South Africans in my country, South Africa. Well, Zionism, based on the notion of the biblical chosen race, has produced two uprisings, an intractable conflict in the Holy Land between Semitic cousins with untold pain, suffering that has no end in sight. American exceptionalism, its overt since 9/11, has produced a never-ending war on terror, with millions dying, maimed, or displaced in the lands that house these elusive terrorists. Colonialism, Nazism, communism, apartheid, Zionism, exceptionalism, call them by whatever name, they all have the same root, where one race or people believe they are superior to another. It is this obsession with us and them that has led all of us into the abyss. Man continues to divide on these unnatural notions, and does he realize that he is in fact sowing the seed to his own destruction by doing so. My own struggle and life's journey has taught me that until this philosophy of one race being superior to another is thrown into the trash can of history, and we embrace our fellow humans as brothers and sisters in this common terrestrial journey, pain, suffering, and wars shall continue. I'd like to conclude with a quote from a song by Pink Floyd, ashes and diamonds, foe and friend, we were all equal in the end. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Rath. We very much appreciate that. And what I'd like to do now is to turn to our first session and turn to David Wexler and Mike Jones. David Wexler at the University of Puerto Rico Law School is the founder of Therapeutic Jurisprudence. He's the director of the International Network on Therapeutic Jurisprudence, and he's the distinguished research professor and of law emeritus at the University of Arizona. And you're going to really enjoy David's discussion on therapeutic jurisprudence, as well as Mike Jones, who's coming in from Summit Law School from Arizona. And Mike is a former judge. Mike has worked and sat on the bench in drug court, probation court, problem-solving courts, and so has applied the therapeutic jurisprudence principles. So what we're doing now is moving from the general down to the court level, and we're going to hear from Dave and from Mike to chat with us about the applications of therapeutic jurisprudence in the courtroom, what we can do in the courtroom to improve matters. And so Dave and Mike, I'm going to send it over to you, and please take it away. Thanks.
Brian, could we ask that you wave if you can hear us? Excellent. Excellent. David, did you want to give a welcome to everyone?
I'm happy to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you may be. We're delighted to be here. And I'm delighted to have Mike Jones begin this presentation, and I will pick up after that. So thank you.
Very good. And I'm delighted.
Make sure you speak up on the mic. Thanks. Sorry, Mike. Okay, go ahead.
No, not a problem. And folks, I hope if you have questions, because unlike being in court, I do like to be interrupted. I like to be interrupted with good questions by my students. So I would hope that someone, if you have a question, would voice that so that we can make this a dialogue rather than just a lecture by me, which would be really boring. The first thing that I'd like to share with everyone is a slide, and I will put that up for everyone to see. It's information with some therapeutic jurisprudence websites. Let's see. There we go. I hope you're all able to see that.
Thanks.
Some important websites and also web addresses. As you know, not only do we have a therapeutic jurisprudence website hosted by the University of Arizona in Tucson, Arizona, but Professor Wexler has a Facebook page for therapeutic jurisprudence. Professor Wexler, myself, and a magistrate judge named Pauline Spencer in Australia have a blog that is a TJ blog, and that address is up on the website as well. Just a preliminary too, I also included the website for Professor Wexler's latest article on therapeutic jurisprudence that's entitled Mainstreaming TJ, with the web address. It's located on SSRN, that's the Social Science Research Network. The complete title is Moving Forward on Mainstreaming Therapeutic Jurisprudence, an ongoing process to facilitate the therapeutic design and application of the law. We also have a TJ listserv that we'd like to invite everyone to sign up for and participate. And number 6 on our list here is the web address for the International Academy of Law and Mental Health, who is hosting a conference this summer in July in Vienna, Austria, with a very strong TJ stream. And I say strong TJ stream because that includes conflict resolution, dispute resolution, using TJ skills or therapeutic jurisprudence in application, in reality. Number 7 on my list is another international TJ conference that will occur in Auckland, New Zealand, September 3rd and 4th, and the address there is on your screen. The theme of that conference is particularly relevant to our themes in today's conference. It's entitled Weaving Strands, the unique interlacing of cultural, legal, psychological, and social practice and philosophy in New Zealand to the international concept of therapeutic jurisprudence. Finally, I have the website for the HEAL Foundation in The Hague, Netherlands, and the site there that relates to therapeutic jurisprudence is entitled Innovating Justice, and it includes innovating justice concepts. And then finally is Professor Wexler's email address and also my email address as well. I'm going to leave that up on the screen for just a minute as I continue talking so that everyone has a chance to look at that. But I'd just like to say by way of explanation, I came to TJ through my experience in the problem-solving courts. I had a little bit of help in that I knew Professor Wexler, respected Professor Wexler, but as a problem-solving court judge, I was a superior court judge here in Maricopa County, Arizona, for many, many years. I retired 3 years ago from the bench and began teaching here at Arizona Summit Law School full-time. My experience, though, on the problem-solving court bench led me to an understanding that those techniques of therapeutic jurisprudence are extremely important in other types of court calendars as well, besides merely problem-solving courts. This concept that we have developed, that Professor Wexler has led us to, we call mainstreaming therapeutic jurisprudence. That is borrowing the principles, skills, and techniques that one uses in a problem-solving court and applying that to all aspects of the practice of law, of judging. In fact, I applied it, if you can believe this, to a regular boring civil calendar with the result that my calendar actually became more efficient. I enjoyed it more. I think the concepts of giving voice, using active listening in our court proceedings enhances all court proceedings. And I've often explained to my students that these techniques are hard to stop using once you actually begin using those techniques. So, folks, I'm going to take that off the screen and return back. There we go. All right. There we go. So I had just started to mention that the therapeutic jurisprudence techniques, I don't want these to be mysterious. We refer to them as TJ techniques, but they're well founded in the science of psychology, in the notions of procedural justice. And I'm anxious to hear from Brenda Morrison today about her concepts and research in the area of smart justice too. And I'm going to stop talking in just a few minutes because I want to give Chief of Police Randall Aragon the opportunity to talk about his experiences in the problem-solving courts. I also want to give Brenda Morrison the opportunity to talk about her concepts and her research into smart justice. And then we also need to give Professor Wexler an opportunity to talk with us as well. So, Chief Aragon, are you there? Are you close to a microphone?
I'm right here, sir. Can you hear me?
I can hear you very well.
Yes, problem solving. In several of the police departments I've worked, including where I'm at now in Fairbanks, we have moved from the paradigm of reactive policing to what I call preventive policing. And, you know, we've all heard the terms community-oriented policing, so this is where we're at right now. The old way, or the reactive way, as most law enforcement officers know, is, you know, I call it the call the police, send a car, make an arrest. Call the police, send the car, make an arrest. You know, it's never-ending paradigm. That's the old way. The agencies have come to realize that all you're doing is taking a good police report, the officer gets back in the car, and just continues on this never-ending process. Preventive policing, community policing is trying, and we're going back to the years ago, 1829, Sir Robert Peel, we all remember in law enforcement. That's why we got the blue uniforms. London Metropolitan Police, he coined a phrase, basically, do not measure the effectiveness of the police by the number of arrests. So it should be measured on the amount of crime that's prevented in the first place. And we still use that to this day, a couple hundred years later. We want to make our officers problem solvers. That's what we're doing right now in the city of Fairbanks. It's proven to be very effective. All these snake pick cities, call them, that were. I was born in New York City. In fact, the mayor kids me all the time. My boss right here. I was born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, New York City. I think that's why I went into law enforcement, because I realized, in fact, to join the Army to have a legal gun. The thing is, New York City, where I'm talking about, major cities have come a long way in realizing they need to prevent crimes from happening in the first place. New York City's turned around. Right now, it's a very safe city. Crimes have gone down nationally, and we've started that right here. It's really a lot to do with what you're talking about. Dispute resolution is going to the root cause of what's caused the crime and eradicating that and preventing it from happening. And I always use an example like the bicycle situation. We could take a good report on a bicycle theft and keep doing that on the same street, but there's got to be a reason why they're getting stolen. So maybe if you have the officers trained in problem solving, they could talk to the neighbors, the ones they work with, and harden the target, prevent it from happening in the first place. So we're doing that in Fairbanks. It's become very, very popular right now. I mean, we've just started. We got a long way to go. We're going to make good things happen. So with that, I'll entertain any questions that you might have, sir.
Chief, this is Mike Jones, and I couldn't help but think as I heard you talking about the importance of talking with the neighbors. It seems that that's something pretty important for judges to do too, but unfortunately many judges do it very poorly by talking at people rather than with people. And I'm wondering, do you or have you experienced teaching or educational programs for police officers in using things like active listening?
Oh, yes. Yes, I was just speaking to a retired chief. He's now a professor here in the back of the room. I've been an adjunct professor in 11 colleges, and I'll hopefully get on here someday. The thing is, it's very important, the community policing effort, like, okay, I'll give you Fairbanks as an example. We, arriving at the door of a citizen, in fact, Alaska is a little bit more unique than the lower 48. I've learned that very quickly. When I introduced community policing in the lower 48, we just randomly went to the doors of the parts of the city that were at risk when we initiated community policing. And, we knocked on the door, and it was, kind of like, what are you doing here? The police don't usually show up at a door unless something's wrong. We're here. I called 13 or 14 when we first started, and they had forgot that I'd called, and we got to the door, and there was kind of a lot of skepticism, like, what are you doing here? And we told them we're here to talk and introduce community policing, and this is your officer. I was doing the training. We in the training that we did online, which I developed a curriculum, active listening was a very important ingredient, because everybody has a story to tell. Everybody, and the 2 or 3 that I personally visited here, once we got in the door, skeptically, 5 minutes later they didn't want us to leave. They had huge amounts of information to give us. They wanted to feed us. They wanted to give us coffee, the citizens, and I'm talking about all races and all ethnicities. So I told the officers, you're going to hear a lot of stories, and just let them vent. And that was like 99% of the solution, was letting the citizens know that we're here not to search your house, which a lot of them thought. We're here to solve problems. And right now, I'm telling you, there's a different outlook on my cops in that area, at least right now. So active listening was part of the curriculum.
Chief Mike Jones again, not to be hogging you with questions, but it also strikes me that to involve the theme of our conference today, that this improved communication is something that can be used to bridge the gap between peoples or police officers or judges or attorneys with different cultures. And I'm wondering if you've noticed that in your experience.
Oh, yes. I could probably write a book on that right now with the five months I've been here. We started this outreach, and I hit the ground running on trying. No, one of the mayor, my boss right here on my left, Mayor Eberhardt. One of the goals was to of the three. One was enhanced communications. Second was enhanced transparency, and the third was enhanced diversity relations with the community. Well, I hit the ground running and visited every single ethnic group that we can, and we're pretty diverse in Fairbanks. It's 63% white. I used the 310s: 10% African American, 10% Hispanic, 10% Alaska Native, and about 4% Asian. I started some real deep bridge building, and it actually, there was an understanding that I'm talking my talk, but I'm walking my talk, because about 3 weeks ago, I was at a meeting, a potlatch, which is a Alaska Native event with a lot of food. I thought it was a potluck, mean the same thing, but it was a lot of food. And I showed up in uniform, and they asked me to speak, and I didn't expect to speak. Well, at the end of it, about 2/3 of the way, it's about the third hour, we were doing a beauty pageant, and Steve Guinness used to be a chief and is now the Fairbanks Native Association CEO. He calls me up to the podium, and he starts talking about how this gap is being bridged by our problem-solving efforts and the diversity relations. And he thanked me for doing this, because there's been some ill feelings in the community before my arrival, and the mayor briefed me very strongly on that, and I saw it. Well, he takes his necklace off his neck, and this is a chief's necklace. And I was thinking about buying one, but I couldn't afford them. They were, little tiny one, but this thing was like an inch thick, and he put it around my neck. He said, "It's yours, Chief." I was stunned, and he said, "Due to your efforts." And he went on to say how we're bridging the gap. So I must say I was floored, and there was pictures being taken, and they wanted to take a picture of me and the chief, and me and Steve Guinness. Felt like a movie star. I want to sign some autographs. The thing is, it worked. So this problem solving and this outreach, it's got to be genuine, and it was. And so I've seen it work, Counselor, and I must say we're just that much completed. We're at the tip of the iceberg. We have a long way to go, but it works, knowing that we really are genuinely interested in working together with diversity, and especially the fact that we're not just out there trying to put people in jail and write traffic tickets. We're trying to solve problems with a joint collaborative effort, which is what this is all about here. So I'm really pleased to be here and honored.
Chief, we're happy to have you here too. I'm not going to hog all the questions. Does anyone else have questions for the chief or I?
I do, actually. Ms. Trina Bailey, and I'm a student here at the university in the comm department. So we know that each person has a story, and we know that it's varied based on race, based on gender, and so we're working to get the people to share those stories, and they in fact are, it sounds like. So what is happening on the other end with the police? What sort of training are they getting to be sure that they're able to hear these messages and understand them? Because the way I convey my story is different than the way you may. And so what are white officers doing to make sure that they hear the story of an Alaska Native or a young black man? So what's happening on your guys' end?
Good question. Our department, we're 53 personnel, 47 sworn. We're not a big department. We have about 32,000 population, 32 square mile city. And I mentioned the racial mix of the city, the demographics. My department they have been through diversity and cultural training over the years. The mayor came in, and the mayor, by the way, worked for Town Chiefs Conference. I think most people in the area know that. He's 13 years, I believe. It might be off a year or two, but he was their attorney. And anyway, he was definitely in the know of what we need to do, and that was one of his platforms. And he's definitely, genuinely concerned about that. So we've had the training, and when I came aboard, I had a mission, of course. So what I did is, in realizing when I did my assessment of operations, which I usually take about 90 days and report back to the mayor, I realized that there is some rubs between the ethnic groups in the city, police department it is, and some might be justified, some might not be. We did make some mistakes. So what I did is I asked one of the key proponents, Shirley Lee, most people know her from Housing First, to give me and develop a training module that we can use at the police department regarding Alaska Native cultural diversity. And I asked one of the key Ministerial Association chairman, Reverend Joseph Blackburn, to come up with the same module for the African American side of the community, and they're both working on it. And I tell you, most cops, and there are some in the room here, or retired or whatever, it's hard to train police officers when you work 24/7. I mean, it's if you work in 8 to 5, you say, okay, we're gonna have a class tomorrow. They're there anyway. But my guys working, 2 in the morning, they're getting off, and when you start bringing them in, it's a lot of overtime, and they've got plans. So what I'm doing, as I did with the community policing training, is we're doing it. I call it blitz training. We're doing it on while they're on duty by DVDs, which it's like an online program. So they can come in at 3 o'clock when the streets are quiet. Officer can actually watch this cultural diversity training, and it'll be monitored. There'll be a little exam. There'll be a sheet to make sure it's been the course has been administered. That's what I'm planning on doing, and I'm waiting on. In fact, they're working on the productions right now, and I want it to be really professional. That'll be an introductory class, current, and then we'll do that on a refresher basis. So we've got to keep that going. And I'll tell you another thing: a lot of chiefs start something, and then they just stop and don't even discuss it later. We've got to keep this perpetual thought pattern. Like if we're talking about diversity, we need to kind of bring that up at squad meetings and roll calls and keep that theme going. And if you're not, you're going to lose it. So that's our plans right now. Hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a follow-up on that then?
Right.
Richard, I'm sorry. In the interest of time, I'd like to move this on and get Dave Wexler and Brendan Morrison involved. We only have 20 minutes left of your segment. If that's okay with you.
That sounds like a good idea. Sounds like a good idea. Is Professor Morrison there from Simon Fraser University?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Very well, yes.
Oh, good. Am I next or is David Wexler next?
I think we have you next, and then
Okay.
Professor Wexler is going to conclude for us.
Oh, that's great. I have one student that has a quick question. Can we go with the quick question first?
I don't know that it's a quick question.
It's not a quick question. Maybe we should keep going then. Okay. I will go. Welcome. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Greetings from Simon Fraser University in beautiful British Columbia. It is indeed a beautiful day here, and I'm here with a few of the graduate students. I really welcome these conversations because it takes all of us in many different capacities to address deep issues of justice and injustice in the world today. And so the work that's being done under the banner of therapeutic jurisprudence, which is done within the context of what the court can and cannot deliver, there's a lot of things that we can do. So the work that being more, say, mindful, including more voices, is really important to delivering a strong sense of justice from the state's point of view, because ultimately the courts and police represent the state and must uphold the laws of that particular state. And it reminds me, because I do a lot of work in the context of bringing the principles and values of restorative justice to many different institutions that hold up the state, not only the justice system, but also the education system. The work on therapeutic jurisprudence reminds me of the work currently being done in schools, bringing social emotional learning to schools. So traditionally, schools focused on delivering the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. And what they're finding by introducing the ideas of being emotionally intelligent, that through that sense of emotional intelligence, schools are delivering the 3 R's more strongly. So schools that are incorporating social and emotional intelligence along with traditional education are delivering students that are better able to read and write and do arithmetic. So it's more of a holistic education. So I'm hoping that the work that we're doing both in restorative justice and therapeutic jurisprudence are going to be delivering a more holistic justice process as well. Restorative justice is a little bit different than therapeutic jurisprudence because it's more community-born and community-led. So it complements what we can do at a state-based level. So Howard Zehr, for example, holds up 3 other R's of delivering justice. So that's respect, responsibility, and relationship. And so for me, what I call collaborative justice is bringing the community together with the state to better deliver justice for those that we serve. This is consistent with John Braithwaite's work on peacemaking and peacekeeping that we opened with at a state level, bringing state level justice. That it's really important to bring alongside in a collaborative process the non-government organizations that are better able to represent the communities they serve. And it reminds me of the work of Eleanor Roosevelt, that when we started the United Nations, that if we can't get into those smaller places close to home, then that's really where the work of the United Nations needs to boil down to. So it can't be just led up to the state. And I think there's different ways that we're recognizing that here in Canada through the collaborative efforts of Smart Justice Canada. So you can look on the website of Smart Justice Canada. It's brought together a large diversity of scholars and practitioners wanting to create a more just system together with the state and local community groups. It's being recognized by the Ministry of Justice here in British Columbia, and it's through the current recommendations of the Blue Ribbon Panel. All this is available on the website of the Ministry of Justice here in British Columbia. And it's also been recognized by the RCMP E-Division that's currently serving British Columbia. One of the best examples of that, though, is an American example. So I'm very impressed with the work of an organization called ROCA in Chelsea, Massachusetts. And it's a great example of the state working together with a local NGO to deliver just outcomes, keep young people out of correctional facilities because that's the expensive option. And now they're partnering with venture capitalists even, who are investing in justice, in the justice process to keep people out of jail, and they're investing in as venture capitalists. So I would highly recommend you going onto the ROCA website and showing how that small NGO is partnering with the police and the state to deliver more justice in the communities that they serve. As an academic, I think it's really important for each and every one of us to be thinking about the idea of praxis. So bringing theory to practice and practice to theory. So the 2 theories that I strongly advocate for is social identity theory and reintegrative shaming theory. Those 2 are really important theoretical bases for us to be thinking about. And what those 2 theories in particular bring to us is the importance of groups to our individual lives. So it's the psychological importance of groups to individuals. And it's not just the idea of belonging to that superordinate group of the nation state. For me, what it means to be a Canadian and living in a just country, but also the other identities that make up who I am and my sense of belonging in the world. So the psychological importance of the groups at many different levels of abstraction, and we need to bring that into our justice equation, and that's how these small NGOs are going to be helping us incorporate, because in the end, our courts and our police really represent the nation state, or a superordinate level, and it's at the layer of the local community that we really need to be engaging with.
About 5 minutes, Brenda.
Okay, because restorative justice is community-born and community-led, and I think they are better able to connect. And they give us a type of security that a state-based justice system is not designed to do. What the state-based justice system is designed to do, it can do very well. But it's really about determining guilt or innocence, and then the judge decides on what's the just sentence in any given case. And that produces a certain type of security that provides for social order that's very important. The type of security that we're lacking today is very culturally specific. It's what the literature defines as ontological security. Ontological security is knowing who you are and where you belong. We each need to know who we are and where we belong. That provides a very rich diversity of voices and ways of expressing ourselves. Within those parameters, of course, there needs to be social order and prevention of harm and also reduction of harm. But the idea of ontological security is what communities can deliver that the state is hard-pressed to deliver. And collaborative justice, for me, is bringing those two ideas of security and harmony together so that we have harmony and security that produces a good sense of social order, social justice, and provides each and every one of us a sense of ontological security. Because when we're ontologically secure, we're less likely to harm ourselves and others. And that's the main purpose of restorative justice. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
Brian,
Yeah, Dave?
Brian, this is Mike Jones again. And I think before we take any questions, if we could hear from Professor Wexler at the University of Puerto Rico in San Juan.
Thank you. Yeah, Dave Wexler, University of Puerto Rico. Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
Here I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, you can hear me?
Okay.
You can hear me?
Yeah, I
Yes.
can speak a bit louder if you can. Up to the mic. Go closer to the mic. Thanks.
Okay, the mic is rather far away. Can you hear me better now?
A little better.
A little better. Let me get up to the mic, which is very far away. Yes, that's the mic. Isn't it? How is it now?
Much better,
Is it
David.
better?
That's good.
Is this better?
It's good. We can't see you, but we can hear you now.
Can't see me. Okay, let's
Right.
see.
There you go. All right, man.
Okay. Wow.
Okay, Dave.
Okay.
Take it away.
Okay. Well, it's nice to be here. I'm here with a group of my students at the University of Puerto Rico, and I'll try and be brief, and I have 5 or 6 points that I'd like to make. I know the overall theme of the conference is supposedly communication issues and culture, cultural diversity, and that sort of thing. And I'm trying to look at that through a TJ lens. And we've already seen how the principles of voice, validation, voluntary participation are really, really important. And what this means in a judicial setting, for example, is that we have to really focus on oral competence, because if we want people to tell their stories in court, and they're not really accustomed to doing that, they may want to speak, but a court setting is a bit intimidating. So we're trying to see how we can really encourage their participation. This is really a question of developing oral competence. This would be the TJ issue. How can we develop oral competence? And what we're talking about here is really communication and language. Now, this is true and important for all participants in all processes, but it's especially difficult when we have different language groups that are participating, and that's an issue that is coming up in TJ repeatedly now. For example, I'm here in Puerto Rico. I'm not a Spanish speaker. I do my best, but the island is Spanish speaking, and they do their best in English, and many of them do very, very well, but many are obviously limited in English. Yet our local courts are in Spanish, but there's a federal court here that's in English. And one of the issues that I've looked at is the federal diversion form. When someone is in federal court and is being offered diversion by the United States Attorney, by the federal prosecutor, that form is drafted in Washington. It is in English, it's technical, it's legalistic, it's off-putting, it's foreign, and that's what it is. And apparently, the form cannot be altered, cannot be changed. There's not a version of it in Spanish. You can't write a separate cover letter in Spanish. These are legal restrictions that are very, very anti-therapeutic and something that we're interested in. This form is a problem really for all people, including native English speakers, but it's obviously of much greater difficulty when you're dealing with another language group in an island that is Spanish speaking and yet has a federal court. Sticking with that issue but leaving Puerto Rico, there's an article that just came out in English, but its title is in Spanish, part of it. Juez, quiero hablar con usted en español. Judge, I would like to speak with you in Spanish. This is what people were hearing in someplace in South Texas, an overwhelmingly Hispanic community where the principal language is Spanish, though the people may be basically bilingual. The judge is Spanish speaking as well. And some researchers who looked at the drug court in that region saw that the clients and the participants in that court wanted to speak Spanish to the judge. They were able to there because everyone was Spanish speaking and because this was not a proceeding on the record. It was just a discussion in court. There was no transcript being kept for purposes of appeal and that sort of thing. So there's a very interesting article that was just published under that name about the importance of language in court systems and what you do when you have different languages and different language groups. Now, I was just back giving a talk in Mike Jones' course in Arizona just this past week, and had dinner also with a lawyer who's from Puerto Rico but now living in Arizona, and he does some work in parts of Arizona, like the border region of Nogales, which is very, very Spanish-speaking on the Arizona side. And I mentioned this article to him, and he said, well, we've got a worse situation because we go in for cases that are on the record with transcripts. And he says, I always ask for a bilingual court reporter. He says it's important because in the absence of that, what is done is videotaping of the proceeding, and if someone wants to appeal, they then hire a court reporter to translate or to print the videotape language. Well, that court reporter is not bilingual, and when anything happens in Spanish, they just put in the transcript in parentheses, speaking in Spanish. Like when you see subtitles in movies that say yawning, for example, or laughing. There can be 20 minutes of a discussion, and it'll just say speaking in Spanish. That's obviously not a good situation and very, very problematic. Even if we leave the issue of the separate language and say we deal with the U.S. and with English, we have lots of, or other countries, we have other issues at stake. One of them is to make people really feel welcome and heard. And sometimes with different cultural groups, you have much broader family situations, much greater participation of extended families. Well, some judges really concerned with this and with TJ notions have changed the seating arrangements to make people feel welcome and to make people feel heard in this setting, instead of having a very formal traditional seating arrangement. The whole issue of forms, I talked about the diversion form before, but the whole issue of forms that are being used in courts and in judicial systems and in administrative agencies is something that really needs review to become much more user-friendly, much more sensitive, and this notion of form reform is something that TJ is quite interested in. Finally, there are techniques used by judges to facilitate the understanding of what's going on in court and of court orders. Judges who state clearly what their order actually means, who asks the affected party, do you understand now? Tell me in your own words what you think I've said. I want to make sure we have clarity on this issue. Otherwise, people come out of court and they will say to their lawyer sometimes, what happened? What did they say? Well, judges who are sensitive to this are going to try and make the communication clear in court. Some judges now have come up, indeed, with questionnaires that they're going to give to defendants, say, and they say, you're going to be coming up for sentencing in 2 weeks. Here are some questions that I'm going to be interested in or that are relevant to the sentence that I intend to impose. So you know these questions, and you can think about them. You're not going to be obligated to speak when you come back, but you're going to be very welcome to speak. And so here are the questions that our hearing will center around. And you may wish to talk with your lawyer about these before, but you won't be surprised when you come in and hear those items discussed. So these are just some ways that TJ tries to relate to the overall theme of the conference. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. We're going to move along. In the interest of time, we're going to save questions to the end, and we're going to move along now to University of Hawaii, Matsunaga Peace Institute, to Bruce Barnes, who is facilitating down there, and tell you a little bit about Bruce. Bruce has been a leader in the conflict resolution and culture area for a while. He's been out front. He's developed courses in conflict resolution and cross-cultural conflict. In fact, one of the courses is called When Culture Makes a Difference, and that's something he's currently offering. He's also got a book called Culture, Conflict, and Mediation in the Asian Pacific. And he has he's now a teacher and a professor, and has been for a long time at University of Hawaii Matsunaga Peace Institute, worked with the Mediation Center for the Pacific, and is a terrific contributor to the area of culture and native Native Hawaiian issues. And it's just a pleasure to have you here, Bruce. And I'm just going to give the floor over to you and the University of Hawaii. Thank you. Some applauding, but couldn't hear.
Okay, how about that?
That's good, Bruce. Thanks.
Can you hear me now? Okay,
yes.
Thank you. So both Brian and Polly have had the opportunity to spend a fair amount of time in Hawaii. That echo. I'm very pleased, to be able to be participating again in this program. I noticed when Brian first introduced himself that he had probably been coached on this, of course, that he said that this is being held, the event on that end is being held on Denai land. I believe that's what he was talking about. And when one of my friends here introduced me to an Indigenous lady named Julie Foster Smith in Australia, who gave me strict tutoring on this. Whenever you appear, in front of a group anywhere in Australia, you have to be able to name the Indigenous owners, the traditional owners of the land there, before you can start talking. So I can see that this trend is spreading. Unfortunately, it hasn't quite reached the University of Hawaii yet for reasons which may become obvious to you as we go into this. But what I want to focus on today is something that we were not planning at the beginning of the time when this conference was being organized, but this has just kind of evolved, or you might say erupted, like a volcano erupts right out of what's happening here in Hawaii. And it just so happens that the campus is one of the epicenters for this event. What we're going to try to do is we're doing a manual PowerPoint here, I guess you could call it. Huh? Well, you can just go ahead and, they don't need to look at my face necessarily. If you can get a close-up of the slides on your side.
Sorry, you guys.
That's difficult. We're not seeing too much there, actually. A little bit of the Blair Witch Project, but we're still not able to see. A little bit now.
Okay, can you? Yeah, this is.
These are articles. They look like newspaper articles, Bruce. What we're seeing. Okay, it's getting better. Yeah.
Can you see that now? Okay, I mean maybe that's just that's kind of the main thing that I wanted to demonstrate, to mention to you today. And so what has been happening? This is in the last week. All of these things that I'm describing have happened more or less within the course of a week. But what launched this whole thing was a protest against the beginning of construction, which was supposed to start about a week ago, on the TMT, which is a 30-meter telescope, which is scheduled, it has been scheduled for a long time to be built right on top of Mauna Kea. Mauna Kea, for those of you that have been to the island of Hawaii or been near that, is one of the two major islands. It happens to be, even including Alaska, I think, this is the largest mountain in the world, perhaps, if you measure down to the bottom of the ocean. From the bottom of the ocean to the top of the mountain. And, of course, the reason why I immediately thought of this as fitting in with the topic of the causes and conflicts of intercultural conflict is because the discussions and the arguments then being made, and the charge is being led by our students, our students and our faculty in the Hawaiian Studies program. And so I think one of the real core cultural issues that's going on is that here's what they're saying, and in the newspaper, which is still sitting on the racks downstairs as we speak. So all those pictures that you're looking at are all pulled right out of that. So those of you from Hawaii who haven't been able to track this very well, you can just pick one up on your way out.
Send them links. Tell everybody else that.
Yeah, we will send you all the people here and even the participants links. So things like TMT. I mean, this is so widespread now that we're listed. This particular issue is listed in the top 5 on Facebook. Of all the issues in the whole world booming around on Facebook, this is one of the top 5 for hits and so forth. So I mean, the students and the faculty are really using the media. What do you call the media?
Social media.
Yeah, I'm showing my age here already. Yeah. I mean, I don't even. I'm a typical guy of my age. I don't use Facebook that much. I always count on my family or somebody else doing it. So anyway, this is the cultural story that's, I think, at the heart of this whole thing, and this is what the Hawaiians are saying, is that according to the Hawaiian worldview, Mauna Kea Summit is where creation begins. Native Hawaiians and people throughout Polynesia recognize Mauna Kea's sacredness. According to the Hawaiian cosmology, Wakea, the Sky Father, and Papa Hanau Moku, the Earth Mother, came together at the summit to give rise to their firstborn, Mauna Kea. This is the reason for the mountain's less spoken name, which very few of us have ever heard until now, Mauna Wakea, which is considered sacred and is basically not used. You don't hear it much. So as you're looking at those pictures, I mean, and so what happened was, well, for a number of years, probably 8 or 10 years, the university controls the soil over there. Well, this in itself is under discussion, because whether even Hawaii as the 50th state was legally, overtaken by the United States is still a subject of fierce debates in our law school and elsewhere. So many issues with that. In the process of negotiating for the telescope, at one point they actually got permission to build 40 telescopes on that land. Of course, and this made the Hawaiians were kind of tracking it, but they weren't quite getting that excited about it like 4 or 5 years ago. Although they started filing lawsuits because of the environmental impact of it. Well, today we have 13 telescopes up there right now, and one of those pictures, one of the pictures on the lower right, you can see kind of the view from the top, and so all of a sudden, then they heard about the TMT, which is sponsored by a consortium of universities and obviously construction companies that are going to build this thing. 30 meters again is like huge. I mean, it's way bigger than any other ones. And according to what we've been all hearing, the location is going to be smack dab in the middle of the top, which is, from a sacredness point of view, that's the worst thing that could happen, the worst place that you could place it, because the ali'i, when the ali'i passed away, a lot of the traditional leaders, they would try to be buried as close to possible to the top, Mauna Kea. So this is a very serious matter culturally from the point of view of the Hawaiians. And so in this newspaper, it was very interesting because the students are getting with it. I mean, just to keep up with this, I have to keep popping out my pocket dictionary and say, well, what is this new set of words? Because it's all things that, only now is there a generation of students. A couple of my former students have been commenting in emails. This is the new generation of advocates. And they can speak Hawaiian. They can speak Olelo Hawaii. So this is a whole new world, and the university is just kind of reeling, to be honest, I think, of how to deal with it. They thought they had a contract, to do construction, and the construction was supposed to start on the TMT last week. Well, the Hawaiians got organized, and one of the other pictures that you showed you, that doesn't come out very clearly, showed that the 31 of the protesters that were out there at Mauna Kea last week were arrested. They timed it such, we don't know for sure whether they timed it this way, but we think they did. It was one day before Merry Monarch started. Well, Merry Monarch is known as the world, it's like the Olympics of hula. People fly in from all over the world. There are halau coming from Japan and from Latin America and everything to come to participate in this thing. And so everybody's wondering whether they timed it deliberately, the demonstrations. Nobody knows for sure. So let's see, what else is my PowerPoint here?
Bruce, you have about 5 minutes?
Guide to discuss it. Okay.
Bruce, you about 5 minutes?
Yeah. Well, what I was thinking about doing was holding this off till the end of the 3 speakers and then let people ask questions. if that's all right with you folks. Okay, I mean, yeah, because I'm sure there may be a lot of questions, but we also want to get our other two speakers, to get their 2 cents worth in. I mean, their time, there are a lot of time. I'm thinking about 10 minutes for each speaker. That would leave us 20 minutes at the end. So.
Okay, thanks, Bruce.
Okay,
that's good.
So, is that all right? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thanks. That's kind of the situation. The Ahu. The other thing is there's a picture. It looks like to the average person, it looks like a pile of rocks. Well, it's right out in front of the administrative building, Bachman Hall, here at the University of Hawaii. What it actually is, if you look it up, an Ahu is an altar or a shrine. So when I went by there the other day, they were bringing out all their children, the children of the Hawaiians. They were coming from all islands there so that their children would learn and know what this was. And what it is, of course, is a symbol of the religious value or the altar of Mauna Kea. And they wanted to be here because the students had to go to class that day, but they're the heart of the whole thing, really. So that's what that is when you drive by and see it, and they put a lock around it. And now my parting comment on this will be this, that our next speaker is the mayor, I believe, of Fairbanks. And so the politicians, they are caught in a bind right now. So our governor and the president of our university, they are both treading water as fast as they can. Well, all the governor could think of doing was postponing it for a week or two, the start of the construction, but they are really in the hot seat. So it may be interesting to hear from our next speaker to see how do they handle particular situations like this where culture is at the heart of it, and indigenous people are really very, very firm in their demands, and there are demonstrations going on. Our relatively new president of the university is actually very unusual because he's from the mainland originally, but he studied under one of the leading hula teachers of all time. She was the mother of all hula teachers, Auntie Maiki is her name. And as well, when he was sworn in as our president, he was able to answer back within a chant that was absolutely authentic. I mean, he really knows Hawaiian language. So this makes things all the more complicated. So that's what I'll say. And like I said, I would appreciate if we could hold questions, until the end of our speakers, if that's all right with you folks. So our next speaker is the mayor of the city. Wait a minute here. I had a couple of other little things that I noticed about his.
The mayor of the city of Fairbanks.
Sorry.
That's okay.
The city, all right. Yeah, but I was going to mention a couple of other little things. Oh, not only is he the mayor of the city of Fairbanks, but he also owns an arbitration and mediation business, an attorney for the Tanana Chiefs Conference, and he teaches a class called Establishing Effective Community Partnerships at the UAF Community and Technical College. Been a city councilman for 9 years. So please welcome Mayor Eberhard.
Thank you for inviting me. I started at UAF here as a first-year student a long time ago. It's great to be back. So I have been an arbitrator, mediator, and hearing officer for 15 years now, and in fact this afternoon I'll be working on some opinions as a hearing officer. I also worked for 10 years for tribal organizations in human resources and as their lawyer. And I came to recognize some of the community rifts that we have here in our community. Lastly, I do a lot of training and teaching in Indian country with tribes and tribal organizations, and part of the course is conflict resolution. So next week, for example, I'll go to Metlakatla, which is the only Indian reservation in Alaska, and that's part of what we'll be talking about. In the U.S., we've seen some really shocking and frightening developments in recent times in Ferguson, in New York City, in Madison, in North Charlottesville. I think we've gotten a jump on these things in Fairbanks. We've been proactive. And at the city of Fairbanks, from the beginning of my administration, about a year and a half ago, we did quite a few things to try to become a more inclusive community. First thing we did, diversity analysis of our workforce. We started regular discussions with the Alaska leadership. We get together roughly every month or so. We talk about a whole host of issues, everything from public inebriation problems, substance abuse problems, to certain criminal cases that have caused a lot of rift in this particular community. We've implemented community-oriented policing, and Chief Aragon spoke a little bit about that. We've held some community meetings on community-oriented policing and just neighborhood problems, and we have a couple more coming up this month. We're in the process of establishing what we call the Office of Professional Responsibility. If a citizen has a complaint, they'll be able to complain to a detective who's been assigned to that office. It's not going to get diluted by going through all sorts of different people. That person can investigate it, can conduct an internal affairs investigation necessary, and will report directly to the police chief, and he in turn reports directly to me. We've increased diversity on our interview panels at the city, not only diverse employees, but also community members. I've made it very clear to department heads that I will pick from the pool of qualified applicants using all factors, including diversity. Our workforce at the city should reflect our community. Our public safety departments do not. For example, police, we have no Alaska Natives. We have only one African American and 2 females. We're also trying wider outreach when we have openings, sending the notices to diversity groups and different places where we can try to attract more diverse candidates. We started a work-study high school program, sort of an internship. We bring students in, they get credit, they learn some work skills, they have insight into government, and we encourage diversity members. 2 of the 3 people in my office so far have been African Americans. We're working with Housing First and other groups on transitional housing, substance abuse problems, homelessness. In South Fairbanks, which has been a historically troubled area, we are looking at a neighborhood improvement plan, everything from traffic calming to improving safety to trying to improve property values. The last thing I want to talk about is we formed last year, I introduced an ordinance or city law, we formed what's called the Fairbanks Diversity Council. It's 15 public members, 12 are nominated by me as city mayor and 3 by the borough mayor. And so it's a sort of a joint, the borough is like a county, joint city, borough or county council. So those 2 governments between them represent about 100,000 people. In fact, the Fairbanks Diversity Council met last night. We've got a great mix on there of Alaska Natives, African Americans, Hispanics, representatives from the gay community and others. And this is to provide a forum and a voice. Now, let me say, Brian, give me the 2-minute warning, because between being a lawyer and a politician, I probably talk all day. But I was trying to think, because you hear people say, well, our voices don't count, we don't have any input, government doesn't listen to us. So I thought, well, what if we form a diversity council at the city? And we have a really great group of people there, and we discuss everything from race relations to how do we improve the diversity in the city workforce, things like this. So it's a good public forum, and in fact, a while ago, just a few weeks ago, they passed their first resolution, which was to support a House bill in the Alaska legislature, HB 42, which would amend the Human Rights Act to prevent discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender expression, or identity. We're also looking at accessibility issues. That's part of their mandate. And we're working on a diversity action plan for both the city and to recommend to the borough. So we've been having monthly meetings. We've been working on these and many other issues. The first thing we did, we got some diversity training ourselves, and Mae Marsh from the university is here, and we thank her. She came along and did that. We've been working on strategic planning and priorities. There are many different ideas and priorities. We're looking at different diversity action plans everywhere from Whitehorse, Victoria, Australia, to places in the United States. So we want to create a more inclusive city and community. We want to talk about issues that have caused rifts in other communities, try to repair those, so we don't become a Ferguson or have serious problems like we've seen in many other places. So thank you. I'll stop there.
First.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Roger Cluck. Roger's from Washington State, mediator, facilitator, and former president of Alternatives to Violence Project, AVP. He's worked with international visitors programs from the Department of State and worked many countries: Afghanistan, Pakistan, Syria, Sri Lanka, Kenya, Africa, Middle Eastern countries, Iraq, Mexico, with youth programs, Myanmar, and Brazil. A former attorney, Roger left the law to move from rights-based solutions to needs-based solutions to conflict. Please help me welcome Roger.
Hi, can people hear me?
Yes, we can hear Roger.
Okay, I'll dive in. I'm speaking today mostly from my Alternatives to Violence Project hat. Violence is obviously the ultimate failure in conflict resolution or dispute resolution. And so the organization I work for focuses primarily on violence prevention, but also violence recovery, trauma recovery work after. As we've been talking about crime and things, I'd encourage people to look at the Adverse Childhood Experience Studies, also known as ACEs, that show that children who've grown up traumatized have a higher propensity for crime, drug use, substance abuse, suicide, etc. So trauma recovery is a big part of helping our society or cultures reduce crime, reduce victims, stop the victim cycle. It's a different kind of restorative justice, if you would. AVP, the Alternatives to Violence Project, we've been around 40 years. We started in a prison in New York where inmates wanted, older inmates wanted a way to help younger inmates be less violent. Like old folks everywhere, they were kind of shaking their head and going, what the hell's wrong with kids these days? And believe it or not, prison is a culture, or a community, I should say, and they got together and formed an activist group, and they wanted to find a way to reduce the violence. They reached out to the civil rights community, brought in Dr. Bernard Lafayette, who was on staff to Martin Luther King, and was a trainer for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and he helped lead the first 6 workshops, along with some Quakers that had formed several organizations on conflict resolution, including Creative Conflict Resolution for Children, and the other name escapes me, but they have a long history in furthering mediation and conflict resolution work. So it quickly escaped from prison. It went to 135 prisons across the U.S., but has expanded into over 60 countries outside of prison. We're in schools, we're in refugee camps. I know people who have helped children in the FARC guerrillas in Colombia put down guns and go back to school. Similarly, in Liberia, we've worked with child soldiers. We're doing work with, I'm personally doing work with veterans in jail in Tacoma, Washington. We've trained police, we've trained prison guards, we've trained gangs in gang intervention work and in drug recovery work. It's an amazing program in that it seems to work wherever we take it with whatever cultures we bring together. One of the reasons it works this well is that it's a facilitated process. The people who come in, the facilitation team, they're not there to teach. They're there to facilitate a discussion, and those of you who are mediators understand that once we get the discussion going and get people to see each other's as fellow human beings, we make a lot of progress. An Irish inmate. I'm sorry.
Disconnected, and that's freed up. Yeah, I wonder if it was a bandwidth.
I'm hearing some echo or something.
All your mics are turned off except for the speaker, if you would. Just make sure the mics are turned off locally so that we can hear the speaker. Thanks, appreciate it. Okay, Roger, keep going.
Okay, so the other thing is, as I say, it's a facilitated process bringing people together. And I just saw a video clip of an former inmate in Ireland who said, what it does is bring the humanity back to humans. It's very consistent with a lot of the things that are being talked with throughout this program. It's largely a circle process. We do a lot of work in the large circle and then in smaller circle, encouraging people to talk. We bring out shared humanity, empathy, community connection, and trust. And once we've built a community in this group, typically 15 to 20 people, then we move into communication and conflict skills. It's very intense 3 days. Shockingly, in 20 hours of work, we have found that we reduce recidivism by 47%, measured 3 years after release from prison. I'm doing work with veterans in prison, and we're measuring, in jail rather, and we're measuring, doing psychological tests measuring their anger. And by bringing them together and building a sense of community among the fellow vets, they come out saying, gee, I thought I was alone in this PTSD struggle or in my self-medication problems and such. And we found that we've gotten a 30% reduction in what's called trait anger, which is sort of their thermostat setting to how angry you are as an individual. When we do a pre-workshop test, they come out higher than psychiatric patients, very, very high. 20% higher than norms on the street. They drop to 10% below the norm on the street. And again, this is all through connecting people to people, injecting each other's humanity. We've been really surprised that as we take this to country and work with different groups, it continues to work because we are putting people together, again, much like in a mediation, but with a structured process. So, in Rwanda, we're bringing Hutu and Tutsis together, 10 of each at a time. We do 10 workshops a month. So we're doing 200 people a month, and we've been doing that for about a decade now. And we're putting perpetrators and victims in the same workshops. A friend of mine did a workshop, and someone came up to him and whispered in his ear, there's at least 2 people in this room know that people here killed members of their family, and we can still manage to get humanity, that common humanity and forgiveness. Similarly, I work in prison. I work with white supremacist group, Bloods and Crips, black gangs, and Latin gangs. And by the end of 20 hours together, those divisions melt away and friendships form. It's stunning stuff. I want to tell a little story more in line with the intercultural conflict here. I was fortunate enough to be able to do a workshop with Afghan and Pakistani leaders brought over by the State Department. And we had a long workshop. I want to share that one of the things about living in trauma, living in conflict for so long is when we ask them, I like to ask the question, share a good thing that happened to you on your way to growing up. Every story started with a tie to trauma. It started with, it was the year my father was arrested. It was the year my mother was killed. It was the year my brother was killed. That's how they placed things in time. But anyway, at the end of this, we had a Swinomish tribe, an American Pacific Northwest Salish Sea tribe, share what they do for resolution.
When you get to that place where you're in a courtroom or whatever, it's like.
I'm sorry.
Locally, so that our speaker. just turn off your mic locally. Thanks, so Roger can continue speaking. Thank you.
And he was explaining that in his tribe of about 200 people, when there was a decision to be made, each person went to the longhouse and they all spoke, from the eldest to the youngest, and each person got to speak. And of course, as time went by, people would just stand up and say, you know, so-and-so spoke my mind, or I agree with this person. But everybody got the opportunity to speak. And he explained, you know, that's the way things had always been. But also one of the rules in their tribe is that no member is bound by the decision. So if they're trying to decide, are they moving to the spring fishing ground, they will have this long discussion, and 90% of the group might decide to go, but others are free to stay. So anyway, at the end of this, he's talking to these Afghans and Pakistanis. He said, but then the Bureau of Indian Affairs came in and said they wanted to give us money and they needed a tribal council. Well, we didn't have a tribal council, so they made us come up with something like a board and have a tribal council. And then they made us vote, and they made us take votes. And he turned to these folks and he said, what kind of democracy is it where 51% can tell the other 49% what to do? And what struck me about this is that all of the Afghans and Pakistanis' heads were bobbing up and down. And, you know, we were importing democracy, shall we say, and trying to import our vision, our view of democracy into their culture. And these tribal cultures share far more in common and understood each other far better than anybody in the State Department or such.
Excuse me, Roger. If we could kind of wrap up here, maybe we'd get in time for 5 minutes of questions at the end here.
Okay, just a real quick wrap up then. Part of what works here, makes this work, is that it's bottom up. We work at the lower levels. We try to avoid the leaders. We work in the lower levels of community. And if the people want peace enough, the leaders will have to follow. It's citizen diplomacy. It's, you know, citizen to citizen, not leader to leader. And that makes a huge difference. Also, the people who train in this leave with the intention to live their lives nonviolently and peacefully. And that's something I think that as mediators, a lot of people know that there's a culture in mediation and dispute resolution, and it's incumbent upon us to not just live that culture at work, but to live it in the rest of our lives. We are doing work in Fairbanks. If you're interested, talk to Polly, and she'll connect you. And I'll stop there.
Okay, we have 5 minutes for Q&A.
Well, actually, we have to go first. There.
I would like to open up the questions to any of the three speakers and part of this group. If that's okay.
Hi, it's Jane Whittington from Simon Fraser University, and I'm sorry I didn't get your last name, but I know it's Roger, and I think what you had to say, I think it kind of connects with a question I had earlier about therapeutic justice, and I wonder how therapeutic justice is addressing or has addressed some of the critiques like Bruce Arrigo's around limitations in TJ in addressing particularly state power and state institutions.
I think that's a question for one of the therapeutic justice speakers, probably. Though I will say, nobody's jumping up, I will say we are doing work with...
Roger, you want to go ahead and finish and then over to Dave?
Sure. I will say that the work we're doing in the Tacoma jail with veterans is very much therapeutic justice. They go to a veterans court or a drug court and are referred to us as part of their programming, if you will, and thus are getting the treatment they need, the social skills they need, and the violence reduction and so forth to, benefit individually and their families benefit.
Let me address a little bit about can you see me or hear me? The critiques of TJ. One of the biggest ones emerges really in the criminal area, and some people have been concerned that there's a lack of concentration on zealous advocacy. And I think the answer from the TJ community is that TJ is really an add-on to a lawyer's role. In one sense, it's very simple then to have a TJ perspective, a TJ hat that you might add on to your traditional lawyer role. However, that add-on may result in a very, very transformative experience for the client and may lead that client to choose certain options other than the zealous advocacy at trial. In other words, how some have explained it is that no rights are given up specifically by TJ. There are options that are mentioned to clients, for example, and that are discussed with clients in a way that traditional lawyers may not discuss them. And this may lead to some kind of dialogue between the lawyer and the client. And in essence, what we have is a zealous counseling attached to a base of zealous advocacy, but that zealous counseling can very often lead someone to choose a different path. And this may lead critics to really feel that zealous advocacy is not occurring. I think zealous advocacy is there, remains there for those who choose it after having a full discussion.
Can I add a concept too that I haven't heard talked about but is very strongly related here, and that's I'd like to introduce people to the concept of trauma-informed care if you haven't heard about it. Thus, for example, I mentioned traumatized kids doing drugs at 18 times the rate of others. And traumatized people carry shame. Doesn't matter where the trauma comes from, whether it's veterans in combat or sexual abuse victims, they carry a tremendous amount of shame. And our criminal justice system, unfortunately, has for centuries tried to change behavior by shaming people. When you have somebody who's already carrying a substantial amount of shame and you shame them, you're giving salt water to a dehydrated person. You're making things worse. And the trauma-informed care movement, for example, has gone into some drug courts and tried to remove the shame through the jurisprudence process. So, for example, how shaming it is to make a person who's relapsed stand in a room full of lawyers and 50 other people and look up at a judge in a black robe staring down at them and have to talk about their dirty urine sample. But that's a shaming thing. And some of the smarter courts have now are seeing these kinds of drug cases in the judge's chambers without robes, with just the lawyer and the client and the judge in a couch setting. And the judges are informed enough to realize that relapse is part of the process. And it's just a much more humane sort of thing.
We need to wrap this.
I'm
sorry. We need to wrap and move on to the next session.
Bruce, did you want to wrap up or say anything there? Thanks, Roger. Appreciate it. That's very good. Bruce, did you want to add any comments to wrap up, and then we move on to the next one? We're just in the interest of time, and we'll have some time at the end. We're hoping that we're going to have some time at the end for questions and for more of a free-for-all. Bruce?
Yeah, one very brief comment is that I noticed a trend toward using facilitation, both in Roger's comments and in our experiences here in Hawaii. One woman, Dawn Chang, who was the facilitator assigned to work on the Big Island along with this particular case, she facilitated over 200 meetings with Hawaiians all over the Big Island. And still she found that there was, a sizable group. But it seems like facilitation is becoming more of a preferred technique for a lot of these things, restorative justice and everything else. With that, I'd like to pass the torch on to the next group. Thank you all very much for
Pleasure.
listening.
It is my pleasure. Okay, it's my pleasure to move on to the next session, our last session. Yukon College is just having some problems trying to get back on, I take it. Can we test with you, Yukon College? Just want to wave your arm to make sure you're back on. One of our speakers is from there. We want to make sure that Harold Gattensby has an opportunity to be there and so forth.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I just want to do a brief introduction of our facilitators, Harold, and then we will hear from you and Yukon College. And so what I'd like to do is to introduce the peacemaking. This is Indigenous peacemaking, our last session. And my pleasure to introduce as our facilitators here, Brett Sheldon, who is a lawyer and works on behalf of the Native American Rights Fund in Boulder, Colorado. He is Oglala Sioux from the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. He works on 3 major projects professionally, and that is the boarding school or residential school, as we know in Canada, healing processes. He works on sacred places protection, and he works on Indigenous peacemaking. And with Brett, we also have Polly Heislop, who's also here to facilitate locally. And Polly is finishing up a PhD in Indigenous Studies and is focusing on peacemaking, particularly looking at Mike Jackson's work in Cake, Alaska. And so without further ado, I'll send it over to you, Brett,
Dr. Jarrett,
to facilitate, and to Polly locally. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brian. Yeah, I wanted to say a little bit about our project at the Native American Rights Fund. One of the projects I work, as Brian mentioned, is called the Indigenous Peacemaking Initiative. And just to kind of place this in context, as we've been talking about intercultural conflict, Native American tribes have been reeling from basically a policy of cultural genocide that was enacted over a century. It's gotten better in recent decades and so on, but the harms are still being experienced and passed on. And the Peacemaking Project is really one instance of how tribes are healing their own cultures by reviving or legitimating, in some cases, their own traditional practices. In other words, tribes have gotten along and dealt with conflicts over millennia before contact with white people from Europe. And during the period when the United States was attempting, I think Canada was doing this too, attempting to remove or extract the cultures from the people in order to so they said to protect the people from themselves. It was really an aspect of colonization. During that, just about everything that tribes did within their own culture was obviously attempted to be uprooted and taken away from them. But one of those things was ways of resolving disputes, and all of the stuff that we just heard Mr. Clark talk about, like shame and so on, were associated with doing things in a traditional manner. Well, that's being turned back now, and this project that I work on here is part of that. And actually, my co-host Polly is one of the advisors on the advisory committee for the project. So this is an exciting time for us. Now, as we move forward with the kind of revitalization of tribal dispute resolution practices, as we move forward with this healing, we're moving forward models that are healing with respect to the relationships among the individuals, but just in doing this, is healing for the communities and the nations as well, because it re-legitimizes their own way of doing things, which parts have been retained throughout time, and it sets it up to be something no longer to be ashamed of, but rather something to be proud of, and that has healing effects too. And this goes to the psychological level even. Not much time to get into that. We do find that there's been some imitation of the way we do things here in the United States, and that can get frustrating. There's a debate whether, if the mainstream United States culture takes up something that people do and kind of imitates a native way of doing it, whether that's another instance of cultural appropriation, and therefore continued application of basically the doctrine of discovery, which led to all the harms that we're trying to peel back and heal from now. But nonetheless, there's increased interest all around because of the efficiency that these models can offer. Within the tribal community, though, when you apply peacemaking, you do much more than just meet in a circle and pass a talking stick or a feather around. You actually include a healthy dose of culture. a culture or our fundamental law that drives a traditional way of seeing and interacting with the outside world and with each other. And the effects can go way beyond resolving a particular dispute. They end up being preventative, and it can prevent disputes from rising to a level of when they actually even have to go into some sort of a forum for dispute resolution. It's done as you go if there's a strong enough grounding in the traditional culture, if there's enough to draw from available to the individuals. So you don't even have to go into a court or a hearing context at all. And this sort of process can happen all along the way, any time, at any time when there might be a dispute. I'm going to put up a little graphic here that talks about the Indigenous Peacemaking Initiative and what we try to do with the project here. Let's see if I can get that up real quick. It's not showing. Hang on. There it is. Okay, it should come up now. And this describes our project. Basically, we talk about the native healing models always involve healing relationships rather than just punishing or addressing a particular wrongdoing. That may not be news to this class, to this group. What we try to do with the project is training. If people need to have their community members trained in different peacemaking processes, we'd like to do that. We'd like to also help them to facilitate how they might incorporate their own cultures, whatever that may be. We're talking about cultures from many different nations, not one uniform Native American culture.
Okay, we can see it now, Brett. Thanks.
The justice models. What was that? Okay, I'm going to go on.
Now we can see it. Thanks.
We also
Thanks,
like
Brett.
to provide the technical assistance. Okay. We also like to provide technical assistance when asked to tribes. From our standpoint at the Native American Rights Fund, we're basically a nonprofit law firm. So a lot of times what we'd like to do is work with the writing and helping them engineer their systems and integrate peacemaking within their systems, their existing, judicial systems and other justice systems. Another thing that tribes have frequently asked for is just samples and examples about how do other tribes do it so that they might look to those other places for models. So on our website, which you should be able to see listed at the very bottom, on our website for the project, we've got samples of tribal codes and other writings that where tribes are actually implementing peacemaking, and what tribes use that for is they look for closely related tribes or other alternatives and just kind of see different ways that they can do things too. So that's a nutshell about what we do at the project here, and I'm very excited to hear what you all have had to say today, and we'll be looking forward to some questions too. As you can, and hopefully you'll be able to see the connection naturally. Thanks. And Polly, let's go over to you, who's one of my favorite advisory committee members for the project.
Thank you, Brett. I just wanted to introduce Harold Gattensby. He is a person in Carquest, Yukon, who actually initiated the revival of circle peacemaking. And he went on later, he visited Cake, Alaska, and we were actually going to have, I don't know who to look at, we were actually going to have Mike Jackson from Cake, Alaska on board, but he had technical difficulties and could not call in. But so Harold and Mike actually revived circle peacemaking in the Southeast Alaska, and they're very instrumental and helping us as Native people in interior Alaska to connect with them and to find out what worked in their community and what can work in ours. We also understand that one size does not fit all. And so what works in the Tlingit community may help us in our Athabascan community, but we also have our ways of resolving conflict that even my mother taught me in my village of Northway. So we do still practice it. What I'd like to see and envision is that we be able to bring it into our tribal courts here in Alaska, or here in interior Alaska, because circle peacemaking is locally based and it's culturally based, and the people who come into circle peacemaking, the offenders, they're really helped along to resolve the conflict with the victim. And victims have a voice in circle peacemaking. And what makes it so good and healing is that it's at home. Our young people do not have to leave the community. They actually get extra care. There's a lot of volunteer help. What makes a circle strong is there's a lot of volunteers who really care for their community and sit in the circle and volunteer their time. And through my research, Cake, Alaska, their circle peacemaking is my case study. I found that the strength of the circle are the people who've been there and back. They're the ones who've been former offenders, who actually have gone through the circle. They're the ones who may have had problems with alcoholism, gotten into trouble, got with the law, and made their lives right. And they can share their stories with the young people, and they may be the uncle, the cousin, or the brother of the offender. And so for me, that circle peacemaking is a local answer. And Mike Jackson, actually, when Brett was saying that maybe one of the questions is looking at cultural appropriation, Mike Jackson was saying because circle peacemaking is actually happening now in cities over United States, Red Hook, New York, I think in Minnesota, and so the big question would be is taking circle peacemaking a form of cultural appropriation? And it really is a good question. I'm not sure if we're going to have, if Harold has an agenda, but I'm not sure if we're going to answer that today. But it's a good question because Mike Jackson is a big component or supporter of circle peacemaking anywhere where there's the people who want to meet in a circle, where there are elders who want to share their wisdom. He actually says that we don't have to be of the same tribe, the same clan. We just have to have the love in our heart for our young people and to have the time that we put aside to help them along. We become their probation officers. Right now in Alaska, if a young person gets in trouble in, say, in Northway or my other village I call home, Tanana, usually they have to call into a probation officer on a agreed time process. And to me, meeting in a circle with a concerned group of people will help that person stay out of the system, because once they're in the system, there's almost no turning back for the young people, and I've seen that happen in my village. And what I really like about circle peacemaking is that everybody's involved who wants to be, the family members. Right now, when somebody gets into trouble and they're taken away from us, we don't know where they go. We don't know who to contact. So we want to be involved with our family members, and because when they come home to us. And so we're the ones who want to care for them. So circle peacemaking is an involvement, a community involvement of everybody who's involved. I don't know if I'm turning away or looking at, but so on that note, I wanted we wanted Mike Jackson on board, and he couldn't make it, and I just wanted to we also had Byron Malat's office, and they had a bad connection, so they couldn't really stay online. But I wanted to introduce him anyway, if you just hang on.
Byron Malat, for people who don't know other sites, is the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Alaska, and Freddie Olin is his executive assistant. Thank you.
Okay, so Freddie Olin, who was online, but he couldn't, he had a bad connection. He is the executive assistant to the Lieutenant Governor Byron Malat, who's also Tlingit from, I'm not quite sure what village, Yakutat. He is co-chair of the State of Alaska Criminal Justice Working Group, and Freddie is staffing with Lieutenant Governor for that work group. And so this administration is sensitive. They want to bring more tribal state relations. They want to strengthen this tribal-state relationship. So, and on that note, I would like to introduce Harold Gattensby, who is a Dakota Tlingit, an advocate for peacemaking circles. He's traveled internationally as an advocate for community-based justice. He's gone to Norway, Belgium, and northern Albania, where he speaks with justice officials about alternative dispute resolutions in interclan disputes. He has worked as a justice training facilitator with individuals, professionals, community groups, and justice organizations, advocating for more appropriate and effective treatment of Native people. In 2006, Gattensby is honored for his work as an EcoTrust Indigenous Leadership Award finalist, and in 2000, he received an Individual Merit Award for his community justice work presented by Her Royal Highness Princess Anne. And by the way, he has traveled to Alaska. He's come to communities in Alaska, and he has been here at the University of Alaska as well. So I'm going to give the mic to Harold Gattensby.
Wow, Polly. That's a pretty, I'm going to have to live up to that now, all that wonderful stuff that you said about me. People hear me? I'm looking away from the screen now, but I got assistants here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you, Harold. Just speak up. We can hear you. That's good, man.
Yeah, okay, we see you too, Harold.
Can you see the back of my coat? It says the healing journey, and that's what I've been on all my life. I'm Tlingit. I'm Irish, I'm Scottish, and I'm also English. I had a hard time saying that. But my heart is Tlingit, and Tlingit means human being. So out of all those four that I'm mixed up with, my preference is Tlingit. Koyana, Masicho, Aitzka, Gunaschis, Doje, Sasrikal. Those are just greeting words that I've picked up in my travels. What's taken me, my relatives. Is Polly there? My sister Polly? And my brother Brian?
You can see us waving. We're over here. You see my hand waving.
My brother Mike Jackson, I'm sorry he couldn't make it. I see some people sitting up there in an Alaska community having lunch. I wish I was with them, my relatives, my relations. You made me hungry watching you. My relations. My relations. All of you. All of you. What are we going to do now? We're in a mess. But Tlingit, Native people have something to give now. And when people quit trying to fix us up and make us something else, that treasure is going to be shared with the world. And that treasure is justice for all. True justice, not indigenous justice. Justice is universal, my relatives. It's not allocated to different races. I'm sorry if you believe that. And justice is something that we need to find together as human beings in a family, not something that's going to be taught to us by strangers. I'm sorry. I don't mean to offend anybody, but I want to be honest and clear in what I have to say. What Polly was, my sister Polly was talking about was in Cake. I had the honor of going there and reuniting with my relatives there, and it was wonderful that we could sit together and bring back some remnants of our ancestors' way of dealing with problems in the community. We lived in a different world. We respected. It wasn't questioned. It wasn't taught. It was lived. And we had open minds and open hearts. That governed us. I'm sorry, North American Native people were never savage nor primitive. As a matter of fact, when I look around at the world today and I know what my ancestors, how they lived, give that back to me. I'll take that any day. I'll go back in time if I could, because it's fair, it was just, and it was for everybody, and it was applied equally. I I think people need to be reminded today that every human being on this earth is 80% water. So when I say my relatives, I'm including you because my water's talking to yours. It's time we realize that to take care of each other, to take care of the earth, to take care of the four-legged, to take care of the winged ones, to take care of those future generations is a collective responsibility for all of us. This is not now about a job. It's not about a career. It's about us learning how to live together again harmoniously with each other. We've done it before. We have stories, we have history. We need compassion, we need love. We're caught up like mud now in the springtime when things melt. I go down in front of my house out onto the delta and I start sinking in the mud. I get out quick because I know if I hang around in that mud, what's going to happen, I'm going to get stuck. But I love watching the little kids, my grandchildren, go down there and they get stuck and they cry for help. They're stuck in it. And I go down and I say, you guys, you be careful when you grow up because those institutional systems are just like that mud you just got stuck in. You needed help to get out of it. And that's what's happened to a lot of us. We need to extend our hands and our hearts now to each other. And believe me, I hear things like this. Aboriginal justice? Well, they say they have that in the Yukon, but, you know, it must be working good for somebody because over 90% of the people that are imprisoned in the Yukon are of Native ancestry. And I don't know what other people think. I don't know what systems or institutions or government may think about that, but I can tell you what I think. It's wrong. It's wrong. 80% of the people caught up in the welfare system in Manitoba are of Native ancestry. It's wrong, and it's got to be changed. As people entertain the notion of finding something wonderful, when I see the incarceration rate of Native people in Whitehorse, Yukon go down to 20%, then I'll know we're doing something together and I know justice will be living again. But until then, we need to all take a good look, I think, at what we're doing, what the results are, and how we could do it more better, meaningfully. Build relationship with people, with human beings, not with institutions, but with human beings. You know, Native people, it's an interesting thing to me because we do live a different life. I suppose everybody knows what the Native word for vegetarian is, at least in my country. It's poor hunter. So we do live in a different world. You're welcome to come and join us and see what it's like. It's good when we're not running from the system and the institutions. It's good. We share, we laugh, we forgive, and we get on with it. There's nobody in this world, in the Native world, our cultural ancestry says we're born with everything that we need to make it through this life, everything. So when people will quit trying to put something good into us and recognize the goodness that's already there, the solution that you're looking for, institutions, professionals, communities, it's in your heart. It's already there. What we need to do is this next generation coming up is love them unconditionally. They're not wrong. They're not bad. They're good. And they need to be raised up like that right from day one. Thank you. I hope myself that we are going to work better together. I don't think the university's got the solution, but I think they're going to help us get there. I don't think the justice system has a solution, but I think they can help us get there. If we can get together and take the time to rebuild relationship, trust, and identify what the problems are, I'm sure it's going to be a brighter future for the next generation coming. I'm going to spend my life trying to make a difference as I have. And I encourage you to, but I want to say this to you. I want to say this if there's any community people out there listening. I got grade 7 education. I never went to university. I never graduated high school. But I have a heart, and I care very much. And that's what's made me. I've been to South Africa, been to all over the place. Some of those places were mentioned. And it's just to deliver the message that it's time for us now to start to work body, mind, spirit, and emotions together for the next generation, but for this earth, for the water, for the air. There's not one human being on this earth who's made of the same thing that I am. Water, fire, air, and plants and animals. If you can find anybody that's not made out of that material, I will worship them and I will hold them up on a pedestal. But if you're just the same as me, I'm not going to put you up on a pedestal. I'm sorry. But I will put you equally in a circle to contribute with the resources and capabilities that you have to make a positive difference in the world we know today. Thank you very much, you guys. I hope I've been able to just say a little bit. I think we're on the right track. I love the work that Brian and Polly and all the other people are doing to get the communities back into their rightful place in relation to a healthy, wholesome living. Good on you all. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much. And please remember me in your prayers as I will remember you. Gunastish. Thank you.
Gunastish, Harold. What I want to do now is ask Brett, do you have any questions for Harold before we ask the audience, and then we turn the mic over back to Brian?
I have one question, though, for Harold. Harold, I hope you're not a vegetarian.
You're okay. You're just as good as all the rest. Just sharpen up on your hunting skills.
Brett, do you have a question for Harold?
Let's turn it over to the audience, Polly.
Okay, let's open up to the audience at various sites, University of Alaska or any other site for that matter. It's our opportunity for students and for people from the community to ask questions of our speakers. Once again, these are people that are contributing, leading contributors in the field, and we want opportunity for you to have that you can ask your questions now and have that opportunity. So go ahead.
Well, my question is about the international justice system, the international or the UN system, and the local justice system in countries like, for example, take an example of the Sudan. The gap between international justice system, the local justice system, and United Nations system creates more injustice in the Sudan, for example, and there is a potentiality to create more injustice down the road if we follow the international justice system, or if we put aside international justice system. We are, for example, in the Sudan, in a mess between the international justice system, local justice system. In the case of the president of the Sudan, has been demanded by international justice system. United Nations system doesn't take any actions. And if it take action, it may create more injustice system in the Sudan. So how can we come out of this mess? Thank you.
Thank you. So to any of the speakers, any of the contributors want to jump forth and take a shot at that?
I would just say, Harold here, get them all in the same room and have a talk about it.
Other comment? Any responses to that? Okay, so the idea was having, local processes and having them work with institutionalized processes. There is a danger if it's too loosey-goosey in a local process that you might have a situation where you could introduce unfairness. And so that I think that's somewhat the spirit of the question. And so what about that? Is there a way to make sure that local processes where people are contributing, communities are contributing, but still maintain the idea of fairness? Often lawyers talk about the idea of procedural justice and having procedural protections in place, constitutional protection, so forth. in the legal process, is there a way then to step outside those processes but maintain fairness, the idea of keeping fairness in those processes? Anybody else would like to jump in on that question? So I've sort of broadened it out a bit. I think it catches the spirit of it, though. We had the Sudan as an example.
Well, I'll throw out there that I think from the Circle Peacemaking side, where you have hopefully a shared common culture, foundational laws or natural law of a community or of a nation, those will typically include mores that will be in pursuit of fairness and so on. I'm kind of punting in a way too when you talk about situations like this, but I think back to Mr. Clark's presentation as well, and the point that you start on the ground level and that the politicians will adapt if enough people on the ground level want to make something happen a certain way. So to the extent you can get to the grassroots and get an agreement, maybe that's one idea about how to approach it. I know from the circle approach that is pretty much in conformment with the way things ought to run. Everybody ought to have a word and have their say, and then you're shooting for a consensus decision in the end. All right, thanks.
So in a sense, then, having people step outside the regular formal process, everybody's doing, as Harold points out, by agreement. The people are coming there, getting in the same room. They're doing that by agreement, and that's the key. Nobody's being coerced into anything, and these processes don't work by sort of, even subtle coercion. They have to be truly consensual, and Habermas's idea of, communicative action and so forth. So we have another question locally from Alaska, University of Alaska. And so please step up with that. Thanks.
Yes, this is Laura Henley, and I'm also in the Communication Department, a graduate student. And I was listening to all the various guest speakers today. It seems like I'm hearing a common thing amongst all of them in the programs that they represent, and that is the facilitation of the sharing of personal stories, or as we say in my field of research, qualitative research in the communication field, the sharing of lived experiences. This seems to be one of the things that is making quite a difference in, it doesn't matter from alternative dispute resolution to the other programs. It seems that's the one thing that's making headway, the circle, the bringing humanity back to humans. So it's also an emergent theme within the corporate America. They are finding the benefits and the merits of storytelling or sharing lived experiences in promoting diversity in the workplace. Diversity seems also to be another key word or theme. So tying those two together, between the justice field, the corporate America, even the communication field, how are we going to get the benefits and the merits of doing this on a wider scale? How are we going to get it out more globally, as we say? It's just become such a global market. Well, how are we going to get this idea, this concept of sharing these lived experiences and personal stories out there globally, and not just relying on justice, relying on the communication field, relying on the corporate America? How are we going to get? Do you think it's going to be at a local level? They're going to just take hold of it and then it will spread? So how are we going to get these benefits more widespread known?
So put that question out to the group. Then anybody who hasn't spoken yet at some of the other sites. I know we have people sites in the room, but we want to hear from you as well, and we don't want to exclude people. So please step up to the mic there at your end, too, if you want to. This is an opportunity. So the question is, how can we get these processes to become more entrenched, more globalized? We can have a discussion about it globally, and not that it rely on sort of corporate sort of branding to get things done, but have that conversation globally. So please go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah,
okay,
Tom DeGrazia here in Hawaii. Hi, Brian.
Okay, Tom, good.
And Chamai to all my friends and colleagues in Alaska. We just heard Bruce a little while ago talk about an extremely important issue that's surfaced here that's highly intercultural, obviously. And I just want to put out to the group so that we're not just having academic conversations and using large words, but look at the practical side. Can any of you help us with an issue like this? Is there any experience on the Alaska side, Puerto Rico, other places that have dealt with similar intercultural issues that could help maybe guide us to put some kind of peacemaking process here together that could be presented to the governor and to the university president to help address this issue in a peaceful and non-violent way.
I'm gonna jump right in here. And it's good to hear from you, Tom. And I'm going to say Harold Gattens can do that. He is a terrific leader in peacemaking up in the Yukon, and can come can come down to Hawaii. I mean, this he has wanted to for a while apparently. So they just want to say that's important because that's a good connection. We have other connections here, by the way, too. We'll connect people later. We can do that. So if you see somebody that you okay, sorry, go ahead, Harold.
Is the snow all melted? I'll go there.
Not on Mauna Kea. I don't know. Is it melted up there on the mountain? But,
it's mostly melted. But Harold, our mud here is non-sticking, so no worries, brother.
You don't need to let your hair. You don't need to let your hair. You don't need to let your hair. Leave your hairs grow. Let your hairs grow.
Okay, I don't know what that is. It's some robotic voice. That anyway. Everybody's welcome to the. So anyway, the long and short of it is we're coming to a close. We're coming up to 1:30. Do we have any points or comments anybody wants to make before we close off here? I know Salisbury University, Brian, Tom, did you want to chime in here, or anybody else for that matter? Now's your opportunity.
Well, the only chime that I would ring is that it's a two-way street. So if we can be helpful on issues that arise in areas where you're working, I mean, this is the time for the peacemakers, and we need to be better organized, and we need to be supporting each other wherever we happen to be in the world, because the issue is the same. Harold summed it up, and there's no need going into that. But I just want to leave this cyber conference with the thought that we're connected, and that we can work with each other and help each other on these issues as they come up in places where we happen to be on the planet.
Well, with that note, that's our closing note, basically, that the cyber conference itself, the dispute resolution conference here, is that opportunity. We're doing that very thing. We're connecting people, and we'll continue to connect people next year through the cyber conference process. And in this year, we had the University of Texas. We didn't have opportunity to hear from Allison Alford, but the University of Texas wanted to come in, and they will be, of course, invited again. And we'll be able to speak next year, and we'll add materials for that to the website. Allison, are you there right now? Just briefly. Okay, they may have dropped off. But basically, the long and short of it is we are continuing to connect people through this process, and it's made possible by all the partners. This isn't about one group or one university, but all of the different organizations and universities that are contributing to this. And so we look forward to continuing that partnership next year and continue with the cyber conference. So. We'll close it here for now, and thank everybody for coming. Appreciate all the information and the contributions that people have made. Thank you for all. Thank you very much.